My name is Dave Rawlings and I live here in Appleton-le-Moors, and I've been the chairman of the Renewable Energy Group since we founded it about 7 years ago. So initially it was just an informal group of people who were interested in doing something within the community for renewable energy and for energy efficiency. We wanted to reduce our carbon footprint, essentially. So the initial activities were about really gathering information because nobody really knew much about it. And 7 years ago there were lots and lots of different sources of information, but it was very hard to understand the technologies, but also the wider issues like how could we actually do something, how could we organise ourselves, how could we get money. People got involved for different reasons. I was very attracted to the technology. That's what I like. I wanted to find out more about what you could do at this scale, at a domestic scale really, or community scale. Others wanted to reduce their heating bills. And I suppose others wanted to impact on global warming by doing our bit. Eventually we kind of focused our attention on 3 strands really. One was wind energy, another one was district heating, wood-fired district heating, and the third one was energy efficiency. So we progressed those 3 projects. The first thing we did was we commissioned an initial feasibility study for a wind turbine. We got funding from the Sustainable Development Fund to do that. So we got the consultant to come and survey the site. Basically, on the basis of that, it looked like a feasible project as far as that initial study was concerned. But there probably wasn't that much enthusiasm within the group for doing it for various reasons, one of which was that, in fact, most of our energy consumption is in space heating. In this village there's no gas, we all burn oil. So the biggest opportunity for saving carbon seemed to be to attack that. So that's where the district heating idea came in. And so once again we got money from the Sustainable Development Fund and did a feasibility study. Unfortunately, the ground conditions in the village are such that there isn't much depth of soil. It's solid rock, solid limestone, and that meant that the capital cost of laying all the pipes was very much higher than we'd originally anticipated, and that kind of put the whole thing out financially. It couldn't be made to work. But then that left us with a wind turbine, which began to look more and more feasible the more we looked at it, because we discovered that we could probably buy a second-hand turbine. 225 kilowatts is what we were looking at, which is not massive, but it's bigger than a domestic one. The feasibility study estimated that we'd be able to generate, I think it was about 500,000 kilowatt hours a year, which at the prices then going for renewable energy would have earned us about £40,000 a year, which would have paid back the capital cost in about 3 years. So financially it was a great project to do. It so happened that a single turbine of the size we were looking at, on the consultant's estimate, would produce about the same amount of electricity during the year as the whole village uses. So it was an ideal setup. It completely offset all our electricity usage, as well as generating money. Probably a little belatedly, we then started to talk a bit more actively to the wider community, people who hadn't really taken much notice of what we were doing. And much to our surprise, what happened was that immediately an organised opposition group appeared. That took us completely by surprise. We hadn't expected that at all. Because we saw the planning process as being the major obstacle, we actually talked to the Chief Planning Officer before we really did very much within the community. And that in itself created quite a stir, because people saw that as a significant step. They've already gone to talk to the planning officer. Something must be happening. Where's this in the minutes of the meetings? That we haven't been consulted. Why are they doing this? What was missing was dialogue. We went from indifference to opposition, without any in-between stage. And by then it was too late to talk to people sensibly about what the alternatives would be. It became a win-lose sort of debate. You win, I lose. Some people were opposed to it because they believed it was a waste of time. They thought the answer to our problems is nuclear power, and that's all that matters. And then there were some who felt that, well, you just shouldn't do it in the national park, and if we create an opening, then it'll open the door, and before we know it, the whole park will be covered in wind turbines. Part of the answer to that is that, well, that may still happen. And if it does, it won't be us who benefit from it. That's the issue. It'll be a large energy utility company that benefits if that's what happens. The outcome of all that was a public meeting and a referendum just on the question of whether we should apply for planning permission. Not whether we should do it, but whether we should just apply for planning permission. And the result was 2-1 against, which was extremely disappointing. That in itself was quite a difficult time because, you know, they're your neighbours, and it got quite heated, the debate. There was some falling out and harsh words said, and a lot of ill feeling, which has taken quite a long time to overcome. One of the things that hurt most was the implication that we were being dishonest, and that came through quite a bit. And that was quite offensive, actually. We had something to hide, or even the suggestion that the people who were active within the energy group were going to profit from it in some way. That was very hurtful. I'm not sure it was intended like that, but that's the way it came across. I think if we could have spoken to people on an individual basis, we could probably have dealt with most of their concerns to their satisfaction. But once they became a group and all those things got lumped together, it became impossible to do that. There was always another problem, always another reason. So in terms of advising other groups as to what to do under similar circumstances, involve the whole community as far as possible from the outset. So it's very easy just to have your half dozen committed people meeting, cooking up plans, and maybe sending out a newsletter now and again. But actually, I think what you really need to do is engage a much wider group in that initial speculative phase. Here's some of the things we could do, here's the information, here's what global warming's about, here's what other communities have done, and generate a bit more momentum and sense of belonging. Because what happened to us was, I think, that because we were a tight group, other people saw it as a conspiracy and they formed their own group, and then that was too late to do anything about that.